Let's go to Washington and to Moscow. John Brain, our North America correspondent, is in the American capital. Jack Parrock is in Moscow for us. First of all, John, what purpose really does the United States use the United Nations for at the moment, considering every time there's ever an issue to do with Syria, the Russians veto any proposal that the rest of the world comes up with that may in some way try to stifle the Syrian regime leader Bashar al-Assad killing his own people? So what purpose does that chamber serve the US nowadays?
Well, of course, you're right. It is a matter of huge frustration to the administration that there is this power of veto by the Russians and they don't actually make any progress in terms of decisions. But it's still an important forum for getting across the American point of view. And we've heard Nikki Haley today, of course, address the UN and warn that the Americans are locked and loaded, as she put it, for further strikes. So it still is seen as a very important chamber for the Americans to get their point across. In terms of action, they have long given up expecting anything productive to come out of it in those terms. So it's really a talking shop, but it's a talking shop which is listened to by the rest of the international community. And
Theresa May said a few hours ago that this use of force was the only option open to these three countries, because she specifically mentioned the United Nations Security Council, saying that diplomatically in that chamber we are getting nowhere. We've just heard that Emmanuel Macron, the president of France, has spoken on the phone with Donald Trump and with Theresa May. What are they what are they possibly considering in terms of the future? Because it's been called a one-off shot by the American Secretary of Defense, but a one-off shot hasn't convinced everybody that that's the right way to go.
No, but I think those three leaders will be hoping that it is a one-off shot and that their message will resonate with the regime of Bashar al-Assad and that he wouldn't be as foolish again to carry out a similar attack. But they are in a very difficult situation because in the calculations for last night's airstrikes, the most important assessment was not the Syrian side, it was what would Russia do. Now, Russia talked very vocally about retaliating, but there had been contact between Washington and Moscow, which suggested that the US knew that that was talk, that wouldn't actually happen. And it's significant that these sites were geographically relatively isolated, certainly from any theatre where the Russians are operating. And of course, that may not be the case in future strikes. So I think all three are hoping that this will be the end to the strikes. This will be all they need to do. But of course, this remains a very precarious situation. Syria is so volatile. It's the most complicated theatre in the world at the moment for conflict. There are so many actors involved that everyone's nervous that a wrong move by one party or the other could lead to a much wider conflagration.
Overall, John, what is the American strategy in Syria after these strikes? Just give us an overall assessment of it.
Well, it's a very good question because not everyone's convinced that there is a strategy. Donald Trump has made very contradictory statements even within the past week or so. Earlier, he was calling for America to leave Syria altogether. He said, let this be someone else's problem. Or he said if they stayed, then Saudi Arabia should be paying the US to counter Iranian influence. Now, of course, he's got very directly involved. So it's really not clear. Certainly they've set down a very clear strategy as far as any further chemical attacks. The US now will have to respond in some form or another, but there's still a huge reluctance to get any more involved in Syria. But as I say, this is such a complicated theatre now, it's difficult to see how the US can extricate itself without causing further problems internationally.
John, appreciate it. Thank you very much. John Brain for us in Washington.